Political analyst Demba Ali Jawo, a former minister in the Barrow administration, says it's now one each to Barrow and Darboe in terms of orchestrating the rejection of a constitution bill. DA's article on Monday's decision in the National Assembly is voiced for us by Lamin Cham of the Standard newspaper.
Now that the National Assembly has thrown out the Barrow draft constitution, we seem to be back to square one as far as the country's constitutional reform process is concerned. But how did we get here, one may tend to ask, considering that providing a new constitution was one of the Barrow administration's campaign promises in 2026. But here we are, almost 9 years after, we are still nowhere near that objective. Of course, many people had hoped that the 2024 bill would proceed to the next stage to give opportunity to members to have their input in the final draft before it is passed on to the Gambian public for a referendum. However, many opponents of the 2024 draft, yes, did not completely rule out that possibility, but they have doubted or had no confidence that their colleagues in the ruling National People's Party and their allies would give them the opportunity to get their views reflected in the final draft before it reached the public for a referendum. Here is the view of one of the critics of the 2024 bill in the Parliament. I quote, "Supporters of the 2024 draft simply wanted to fool us to allow it to pass to the next stage, knowing that they had the numerical power to block any views that did not favor them." Unquote. Well, we can recall also that when the 2020 draft was presented to the National Assembly in September 2020, it was the supporters of President Barrow, no doubt with encouragement from the executive, who refused to give it the opportunity to pass to the next stage, but instead killed it at the second reading stage. Interestingly, however, some of the strongest advocates for the passage of the 2024 draft were among those who not only participated in the killing of the 2020 draft, but also celebrated and danced over it. Therefore, they seem to have been paid in their own coin by being on the losing side this time round. There is no doubt that if the government had allowed the 2020 draft to pass, we would have been in the Third Republic with a more consolidated democracy rather than continuing to still haggle over constitutional reform. It means so far the almost $200 million spent in building the two drafts may have been thrown down the drain. Now that the legislative march has ended in a one-all draw, maybe it is time to go back to the drawing board in a bipartisan manner to come up with a draft that would be acceptable to both sides of the legislature. Let us therefore hope that everyone has learnt a thing or two from the tussle and have all realized that they need each other if they are to achieve anything positive. No doubt the Barrow administration have also realized that it was wrong for them to produce a self-serving document which they thought they could just force down the throats of the people. If indeed they had consulted and involved all stakeholders in the drafting process, rather than putting only their own ideas in the document, it could have been a different outcome today. The question that many people tend to ask is where this latest defeat has left the credibility of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Dawda Jallow. This is the second time Dawda Jallow is having his constitutional draft being thrown out, and in many other jurisdictions, he would have taken personal responsibility of the failure and resigned. However, we seem to live in a different reality where public officials hardly assume personal responsibility for such failures.
And that article by Demba Ali Jawo, or D.A. Jawo, will be available in the coming minutes on his Facebook page and other social media handles.